Pack your things and leave, you parasite. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misheard my father. I looked across the dinner table at Martin Bennett. "Dad, what did you just call me?" He looked away first. Then he laughed. "Don't make this dramatic. Your brother and his fiancée are moving into the penthouse. They deserve the place more than you do." My younger brother Ethan leaned back in the chair I had bought. Sierra, his fiancée, rested one manicured hand over my father's wrist, as if he were the one who needed comforting. Nobody mentioned the obvious. My name was the only name on the lease. Every rent payment for the previous 36 months had come from my account. The furniture, the utilities, the parking, most of the household expenses. Mine. And now they were giving me until noon the next day to leave. Worse, they expected me to keep paying after I was gone. "Ethan needs time to make his new venture profitable," Dad said. "You can cover the next couple of months." I stared at him. "So you want me out tomorrow?" "Yes." "But you want my bank account to stay?" His expression hardened. "Don't be vulgar." I almost laughed. "You're asking me to finance a home I'm no longer allowed to live in." "This is what families do," he snapped. "We help the people who need it most." I looked at Ethan. He didn't meet my eyes. Then Sierra smiled. "Claire, transitions can feel threatening. Sometimes loving people means making room for someone else's next chapter. My home, my money, my life." Apparently, all of it was now someone else's next chapter. I didn't argue. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. "Understood." Dad smiled. He thought quiet meant surrender. He had no idea that before noon the next day, I would surrender the penthouse completely. And at 12:18, his access card would turn red. But the red card was only the beginning. Because what happened over the next 48 hours would expose exactly what my family had planned for me, and cost them far more than a view of Chicago. 3 years earlier, this arrangement had felt like love. My mother had died after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. After that, my father stopped functioning in almost every way that didn't involve breathing. He left mail unopened, ate crackers for dinner, and replayed the same 14-second video of Mom laughing until his phone died. I was 31 then, working as a senior risk manager. I was trained to notice danger before it became expensive. But grief doesn't fit neatly into a risk model. Dad begged me not to move him back into the suburban house where Mom had spent her final months. He said every room felt like punishment. I had been preparing to buy a 2-bedroom condo. I had the pre-approval. I had the down payment. Instead, I withdrew my offer and signed an 18-month lease on a furnished penthouse in River North. The rent was $8,700 a month before parking, utilities, and fees. Dad was an authorized occupant. I was the sole leaseholder, the only person financially responsible. We called it temporary. Then one renewal became 2. I couldn't bear the thought of putting my widowed father back into the house where Mom had died. So I stayed. There were nights when helping him felt effortless. And there were nights when I ate alone at the kitchen island while he watched Mom's old videos behind a closed bedroom door. I was exhausted. But guilt translated exhaustion into duty. I told myself I was preserving our family. I never admitted that maybe I was also afraid that if I stopped being useful, I would stop having a place in that family. My younger brother Ethan never seemed to have that fear. At 30, he had already moved through a fitness app, a luxury travel channel, and a creative strategy agency with almost no clients. He called Dad every Sunday. He called me whenever an invoice was overdue. I once lent him $6,000 for a certification program he never completed. When I asked about repayment, he sent me a thumbs-up emoji, then disappeared for 2 months. Dad always defended him. Ethan is still finding his direction. Apparently, my direction was supposed to include carrying everyone else. Then, Sierra Cole entered the picture. She made lifestyle videos online. The first time she visited the penthouse, she didn't ask how I was. She walked toward the windows, turned slowly, and said, "This light would make an incredible studio." A week later, she posted a photograph from my terrace. The caption said, "Soon." When I asked Ethan what it meant, he laughed. Sierra likes to manifest things. I should have paid attention. 6 weeks before that dinner, I found her measuring the wall behind my desk. Blue tape marked the floor around my bookcase. "What are you doing?" "Testing dimensions." She pointed toward my office. "Your room gets better afternoon light than the guest room." Ethan told me not to make it weird. Dad said they were just brainstorming. 2 nights later, I heard Dad speaking to Ethan through the kitchen speakerphone. I was standing unseen in the hallway. Ethan asked, "What if Claire refuses?" Dad answered immediately, "She won't make a scene." A pause. Then, "Your sister only knows how to sacrifice. Give her a few days and she'll convince herself this was her idea." I backed away before they could hear me. That sentence hurt because part of it was true. For 3 years, I had turned every insult into an explanation, every demand into a responsibility, every sacrifice into proof that I loved them. I had confused being dependable with being disposable. The next morning, an $18,500 charge appeared in the shared household account. I opened the transaction. Custom media wall. Designer chairs. Sound panels. All for Sierra's future studio. Most of the money in that account was mine. When I confronted Dad, he called it an investment in Ethan's future. "You have a stable salary." That isn't an answer. You've become obsessed with numbers. I stared at him. "I work in risk management." "And there it is again," he said. "You reduce everything to money." Then he told me to be home Friday night. Family dinner. By then, Sierra's measurements made sense. So did her caption. I just didn't yet understand how completely they expected me to disappear, while my money stayed behind. Friday evening arrived with a strange kind of silence. Ethan and Sierra walked into the penthouse carrying fabric samples, furniture catalogs, and 2 bottles of champagne. They weren't dressed like guests. They looked like people arriving for a move. My place at the table had been shifted toward the far end. Ethan sat beside Dad. Sierra placed a folder in front of her. Across the front were 3 words: Bennett's House Launch. I stared at it. "What is that?" Sierra smiled. "You'll see." Nobody opened the champagne. Not yet. Dad cleared his throat. Claire? I looked at him. Your brother and Sierra are moving into the penthouse tomorrow. I waited for the rest. It never came. You'll need to pack your things and leave. Leave for how long? Permanently. Ethan finally spoke. We're getting married. We need a proper home. Sierra added, and I need somewhere to build my brand. I looked around the room. My name is the only one on the lease. Ethan waved his hand. Dad lives here. Management knows him. We'll transfer everything later. Later? I looked directly at him. Who pays until later? Nobody answered. Dad took a sip of wine. You can cover the next couple of months. Ethan needs time to stabilize the agency. I stared at him. You want me out tomorrow, but you want me to keep paying? You earn plenty, Claire. That doesn't make it yours. His jaw tightened. This is exactly what I'm talking about. What? You reduce everything to money. I looked at the furniture around us. I paid for most of this. You benefited from living here. I moved here because you said you couldn't survive alone. That was 3 years ago. Yes. And I'm better now. The words came out calmly, almost casually, as if the 3 years of rent, medical rides, groceries, utilities, and everything else had simply been part of a temporary arrangement that no longer mattered. Then Dad added, a woman your age should have her own life. I almost laughed. I had one. The room went quiet. I put it on hold for you. Ethan leaned forward. This is exactly why we didn't tell you sooner. Why? You turn every good thing into a debt. Sierra placed her hand over Dad's wrist. Claire, transitions can feel threatening. I looked at her. She continued in that soft, carefully controlled voice she used in her videos. Sometimes loving people means making room for someone else's next chapter. I almost laughed again. You want my home. We want the family to grow. No, you want my home. Her smile disappeared. I looked at Ethan. When did you decide this? He hesitated. Then, nearly 2 months ago. I looked at Dad. 2 months? He didn't answer. Sierra finally spoke. My sponsor is expecting my first penthouse campaign on Monday. There it was. The missing piece. This wasn't some family decision made yesterday. They had already built a future around my home. They had promised someone else access to something they did not own. I looked at my father. You promised them my home. Don't exaggerate. You told the concierge I was moving out. His eyes flickered. You already spoke to the building? Dad said nothing. That was enough. You planned this for 2 months, I said. You spent my money. You promised my home to them, and you gave me less than 18 hours to disappear. Enough. His face reddened. Pack your things and leave, you parasite. The word landed harder the second time. I stared at him. He couldn't hold my eyes. Sierra rubbed his wrist. Ethan gave a nervous laugh. Claire, don't perform. Something inside me went completely still. No pleading. No arguing. No list of everything I'd sacrificed. I folded my napkin. Understood. Dad visibly relaxed. Good. He stood. I'll pick them up at 9 tomorrow. Then he pointed toward my office. Be gone by noon. Leave the office furniture. Sierra needs it. I went to my room, locked the door, and sat on the floor holding Mom's blue scarf. For almost an hour, I waited. Part of me still expected Dad to knock, to apologize, to tell me he'd gone too far. He never came. Instead, I heard champagne corks popping in the dining room. Then Ethan and Sierra started discussing where her logo should go. At 1:40 in the morning, I opened my lease. I read Clause 18 4 times. Accelerated surrender. Fixed termination charge. Vacant possession. I checked the remaining term. 9 months. More than $80,000 before utilities and fees. The termination charge was $19,400. It was painful. But suddenly, the decision was simple. I opened my laptop. At 2:13, I drafted an email to the property director. At 2:18, I pressed send. I was done asking people to respect a boundary they had already decided didn't exist. If they wanted me gone, I would leave. But I would leave completely. The property director called at 6:32 the next morning. Ms. Bennett, I reviewed your request. And? Your lease is clear. You're the sole tenant. I closed my eyes. What happens to my father? His authorized occupancy exists under your tenancy. Once the surrender is complete, management will coordinate collection of his belongings. Nothing gets removed? Nothing. That mattered to me. I wasn't trying to steal anything. I wasn't trying to punish Dad. I was ending the contract I legally controlled. The price was $19,400. Money I had originally saved for my own home. I approved it anyway. At 7, 2 movers arrived. I took only what belonged to me. My clothes, my books, my files, my walnut desk, my artwork, the photographs I had purchased, the espresso machine. Everything else stayed. Dad's piano stayed. His golf club stayed. His medication stayed. The chair where he watched Mom's videos stayed. Then I saw the silver picture frame on his nightstand. The frame belonged to me, but the photograph inside showed Dad and Mom on their anniversary. I left it. I wasn't going to turn memories into weapons. Then I found a stack of birthday cards I'd written to Dad over the years. Some were still unopened. For a second, I wanted to take them. Proof that I had tried. Proof that I had loved him. Instead, I placed them beside his medication. I didn't need evidence to know what I had given. While I packed, the family group chat started lighting up. At 7:18, Ethan sent, "Don't take the desk. It fits the studio plan." I stared at the message. They were already designing my replacement before I had even left. At 7:41, Sierra posted a photograph of champagne glasses. New home, new level, new legacy. I looked around the room. They were celebrating a home they didn't own. At 8:06, Dad messaged me privately. Try not to create an ugly scene when we return. I replied, there won't be one. At 8:37, I heard him talking to Ethan on speakerphone. I stayed silent. Ethan asked, do you think she'll keep paying through the summer? Dad laughed. She'll complain. A pause. But she always pays. Sierra laughed in the background. That sentence did something strange to me. It didn't hurt. It clarified everything. Not, she always helps. Not, she always comes through. Not, she'll always be there. She always pays. At 8:55, Dad left to collect Ethan and Sierra from their hotel. He was wearing the jacket I'd bought him for his birthday. He carried the building's spare access card. Before entering the elevator, he looked at my boxes. I expect everything finished by noon. It will be. He smiled. He heard obedience. He didn't hear finality. At 9:10, the movers took my belongings to a furnished studio I had reserved in the West Loop for 30 days. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't my dream home. But it was mine.
Temporary.
Private. Safe. Before I left the penthouse, I photographed every room, every cabinet, every wall, every piece of furniture I was leaving behind. Then I printed 36 months of financial records. Rent. Parking. Utilities. Housekeeping. Groceries. Medical transportation. Furniture. And the $18,500 studio expense. The total was $349,120. I placed the pages on Dad's desk. The cover sheet read, Financial support paid by Claire Bennett. Underneath, support ends with the lease. No insult. No threat. Just the numbers. At 10:45, I met the property director. She reviewed the photographs, the payment receipt, and the surrender agreement. At 11:41, I placed 2 keys, 3 access cards, the garage pass, and the mailbox key on the desk. She stamped my copy. Received. Then she told me security would deactivate every credential linked to Unit 391 at noon. I looked at the final access card in my hand. For 3 years, that little piece of plastic had meant home. I remembered Dad teaching me to drive. Mom dancing barefoot in the kitchen. Ethan falling asleep against my shoulder on a childhood flight. The memories were real. But they couldn't be allowed to become chains. My phone buzzed. Dad. Make sure you leave champagne glasses out. Sierra wants arrival footage. I looked at the message. Then I released the card. At 11:58, I walked out of the building. At noon, my tenant account disappeared. And 18 minutes later, 3 people who believed the penthouse belonged to them walked toward the private elevator. Dad tapped his card. The screen turned red. He tried again. Red. Ethan tried his. Red. Sierra tried the garage. Red. Then the service entrance. Red. And that's when my phone started ringing. My phone started ringing before I even reached the parking garage. Dad. I let it ring. Then again. Then Ethan. Then Dad. By the time I reached my temporary apartment, there were 12 missed calls. The first message from Dad said, "What did you do?" The second, "Call the building immediately." 9. The third was less controlled. "This is my home." I sat on the edge of my new bed and stared at those words. His home. For 3 years, he had called it my mother's home. Then he had called it our family home. Now that the access card had turned red, it was suddenly his. A few minutes later, the property director emailed me. She explained that Dad, Ethan, and Sierra had arrived with luggage and equipment for the studio. They had expected to move in immediately. Instead, security had stopped them in the lobby. Dad had demanded to speak with the manager. He had insisted that the lease was a technicality. The property director showed him the surrender agreement. Dad apparently refused to believe it. "This is my residence," he told her. She answered calmly. "Your occupancy was authorized under Ms. Bennett's lease." Dad demanded to know where I was. She told him she couldn't disclose my location. That apparently made him furious. Ethan tried another approach. He told management that my father had lived there for years and that the family had already arranged to move. The answer remained the same. The lease had been surrendered. The unit was no longer available to them. And because the surrender had been processed before noon, there was nothing management could restore. Dad called me again. I finally answered. "What?" His voice exploded through the phone. "You deliberately locked me out." "No." "You knew exactly what you were doing." "Yes." Silence. That answer seemed to stop him. Then he lowered his voice. "You've embarrassed me." "You told me to leave." "I didn't tell you to destroy my life." "You asked me to leave the home I paid for." "You're twisting this." "Dad, you gave me less than 18 hours. You could have stayed." I laughed once. "You told me to pack my things and leave." "You knew I didn't mean it literally." I closed my eyes. "You called me a parasite." That was anger. "You told Ethan and Sierra they could have my home." Another pause. Then he said, "You're making this about money." "No." I looked at the ceiling. "You made it about money when you asked me to keep paying after I left." He hung up. 5 minutes later, Ethan called. His tone was completely different. "You need to fix this." "No." "You can't just abandon Dad." "I didn't abandon him." "You left him without a place to live." "He has a house." "He doesn't want to go back there." "That isn't my responsibility." "You're unbelievable." I said nothing. Then Ethan changed tactics. "You know Dad isn't well." That sentence almost worked. Almost. Because that was the sentence I had heard for 3 years. Dad isn't well. Dad needs help. Dad can't handle this. Dad doesn't understand. And every time I believed it, another responsibility became mine. I finally answered. "Then help him." Silence. You're his son. He hung up. Sierra called next. I almost ignored her. Instead, I answered. My sponsor has a photographer arriving Monday, she said. I know. You've ruined everything. No, your plans depended on a home you didn't own. She took a breath.
Claire, this doesn't have to become ugly.
I almost smiled. It already became ugly when you measured my office without asking. That was brainstorming. You told your sponsor you had the penthouse. We thought you were leaving. Based on what? Silence. I had my answer. They had assumed. Not asked. Assumed. Then she said something I didn't expect. Ethan told me you were planning to move anyway. I froze. Excuse me? He said you had been talking about buying a condo. I was. So? So I never told him I was leaving the penthouse. He said you were. That was the first crack in the story. Ethan hadn't simply reacted to my father's decision. He had apparently been telling Sierra, and possibly others, that I was already leaving. For how long? I didn't know. I ended the call. Then I opened my banking records. The $18,500 studio charge suddenly looked different. I checked the date. 6 weeks earlier. Exactly when Sierra had started measuring my office. I opened another document. The payment had been made to a company called Bennett Creative Holdings. Ethan's agency. Not a furniture company. Not a construction company. His company. I stared at the transaction. Dad had called it an investment. But the money hadn't gone directly toward a studio. It had gone into Ethan's business. I opened the transaction history. There were 3 smaller payments before the $18,500. $4,200. $7,500. $3,900. All labeled. Family support. All transferred to Ethan's company. I had never approved them. My stomach tightened. I called the bank. The representative explained that Dad had been an authorized user on the household account. I had added him years earlier because he needed access to pay utilities. He had used that authorization to transfer money. The representative couldn't reverse the transactions without documentation. I ended the call. Then I opened the original account agreement. Dad's authorization was still active. I removed it. Immediately. Then I changed every password. Closed the shared account. Transferred the remaining funds into my personal account. And called the bank's fraud department to document the unauthorized business transfers. I wasn't accusing him of a crime. Not yet. I was creating a record. Because suddenly, the story was bigger than a penthouse. Dad had spent my money preparing to replace me. And Ethan had apparently known about it. I forwarded the transaction history to the property director and saved copies offline. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Dad. I know about the money you moved. Another message followed. You think you can leave us with nothing? Then, remember, Claire, I have documents too. I stared at the last sentence. Documents? What documents? Before I could think, another message arrived. A photograph. It showed a folder sitting on my father's old desk. On the cover was my full name. Underneath, handwritten in black ink, Family Property Agreement. My heart started beating faster. I had never signed a family property agreement. Not once. I zoomed in on the photograph. There was a signature at the bottom. My signature. Or something that looked exactly like it. I whispered, "What the hell is that?" Then Dad sent one final message. "You should have stayed quiet." I stared at the screen. For the first time since leaving the penthouse, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about whether my father had just shown me a document that could change everything. Because if that signature was real, I had a problem. And if it wasn't, someone had just made a very serious mistake. I stared at the photograph for almost a minute before I touched the screen again. The folder had my name on it. The signature underneath looked like mine. But there was one problem. I had never seen that document. I called the property director first. "Have you ever received anything called a family property agreement connected to my lease?" She paused. "No." "Are you sure?" "I would have needed to see it for any change in tenancy or ownership." "Thank you." I ended the call. Then I called the attorney who had reviewed my original lease 3 years earlier. He answered from his office. "Claire? I need you to look at something." I forwarded the photograph. He didn't respond immediately. Then, "Where did this come from?" "My father." Another pause. "Claire, don't sign or acknowledge anything until I see the original." "I haven't." "Good." He asked me to send the lease, the surrender agreement, and the photograph. I sent everything. 20 minutes later, he called again. "That signature is not enough to establish anything." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the document could be meaningless. It could also be a private agreement someone created without proper execution. I need the original." "Dad says he has documents." "Then let him produce them." I leaned back. For the first time, I felt something close to relief. Not because I knew what the folder contained, because I finally had someone on my side who wasn't asking me to feel guilty. I called Dad. He answered immediately. "You finally decided to talk. What is the family property agreement?" Silence. Then, "You know exactly what it is." "No, I don't." "You signed it." "When?" "Years ago." "Where?" Another pause. "Your mother was there." That made my stomach tighten. Mom died before I signed the penthouse lease. This wasn't about the penthouse. Then what was it about? He didn't answer. "Dad." "You always wanted everything documented." "That doesn't explain the document." His voice hardened. "You don't get to walk away from your family and pretend obligations disappear." "That's not an answer. You owe this family." I closed my eyes. There it was again. Not the document. The threat behind it. "You've spent years helping us," he continued. "You can't suddenly decide none of it matters." I haven't. You moved the money. I moved my money. You terminated the lease. Yes. You locked us out. No, management deactivated access after I surrendered the lease. You knew exactly what would happen. Yes. His breathing became heavier. You're going to regret this. Maybe. I looked at the photograph again. But first, I want the original document. He hung up. My attorney called less than an hour later. I've checked the public records. And? Nothing matching that title is attached to the penthouse. I exhaled. So it's worthless? I didn't say that. He paused. There's something else. What? Your father's photograph appears to show more than one document in that folder. I zoomed into the picture. Behind the family property agreement was another page. A bank statement. And another document with a familiar logo. Bennett Creative Holdings. My attorney continued. Do you recognize the transaction date? I looked closer. It was the same date as one of the transfers from the household account. The $18,500. I felt cold. So this isn't about the penthouse. Maybe not. Then what is he hiding? I don't know yet. He told me not to contact Dad again until we reviewed the records. I agreed. That night, I barely slept. At 6:14 the next morning, Ethan showed up outside my temporary apartment. I knew it was him before I opened the door. He was standing in the hallway with 2 coffees. I thought we could talk like adults. I didn't open the door fully. What do you want? To fix this. Fix what? The apartment, Dad, Sierra's business. None of those are mine to fix anymore. He looked irritated. You're really going to throw away the family over a lease? No. Then what? You already know. He looked down. For a second, I thought he might finally tell the truth. Instead, he said, Dad is sick. He wasn't too sick to call me a parasite. People say things when they're angry. He also transferred $34,000 into your company. His face changed. What? I have the records. He stared at me. That's not what you think. Then explain it. He couldn't. I opened the door slightly wider. Why did Dad send money to Bennett Creative Holdings? Ethan swallowed. It was for the studio. Then why did you tell me it was going toward furniture? I don't know. You don't know? He looked away. Dad handled the transfers. You knew. I knew he was helping. With my money. I thought you agreed. I never agreed. He rubbed his forehead. Claire, you don't understand what Dad was trying to do. Then tell me. He remained silent. Ethan. Finally, he whispered. He thought if you left, you would come back. I felt my chest tighten. Why? Because you always do. That's not an answer. He looked at me. Dad said you needed to realize the family could move forward without you. And the penthouse? He wanted Ethan and Sierra to take over the lease. I'm not asking about Dad's plan. I stared at him.
I'm asking about yours.
His expression changed.
You're acting like I stole your life.
You were moving into my home.
You were going to leave eventually.
Who told you that? He said nothing. Then I remembered Sierra's words. Ethan told me you were planning to move anyway. I stepped back.
You lied to her. I was trying to make the transition easier.
You lied to Dad.
No. You told everyone I was leaving. He looked away.
Ethan. His voice dropped.
I didn't think you'd actually fight.
That sentence told me everything. They hadn't planned for resistance. They had planned for compliance. I closed the door. Go home. He put the coffee down.
You can't keep doing this.
Doing what?
Cutting everyone off.
I looked through the doorway. I didn't cut you off. You stopped paying.
That isn't the same thing.
It is to us.
He walked away.
I watched him disappear around the corner. Then my attorney called.
Claire, I found something.
What?
I located the original document.
My heart stopped.
Where? Your father's attorney's office.
What does it say? Another pause.
I don't want to discuss this over the phone.
Why?
Because the document isn't a property agreement.
My stomach tightened. Then what is it?
His answer was quiet. It concerns the money your mother left behind.
I sat down. My mother. The money I had never known existed.
The account Dad had always said was exhausted after her medical treatment.
My attorney continued.
And Claire...
Yes?
Your father's signature is on it.
A cold silence filled the room.
What's mine?
He took a breath.
Your signature is there too.
I looked at the photograph again. The signature wasn't the frightening part anymore.
The frightening part was the date. It was signed 3 months after my mother died. It was signed 3 months after your mother died.
My attorney's words stayed in my head.
I looked again at the photograph Dad had sent me. The document was real.
The signature appeared to be mine. But I knew I had never signed it.
I need the original, I said.
You'll have it.
I arranged to obtain a certified copy.
What does it actually say?
I'll explain when we meet.
I didn't like that answer. But I trusted him enough to wait. 3 hours later, I was sitting in his office with the documents spread across a conference table. He turned the first page toward me. At the top, Family Property and Support Agreement. Below it was a list of assets. The penthouse wasn't there. Neither was my father's house. Instead, the document referenced funds belonging to my mother's estate. I read the first paragraph twice. Then I looked up.
Dad told me that money was gone.
My attorney nodded.
That appears not to be true.
My mother's estate had contained an investment account worth significantly more than Dad had admitted. I had never known about it. For years, I had assumed my mother's medical bills had consumed most of her assets. But the account had remained. And according to the document, I had supposedly agreed to allow my father to manage it. I looked at the signature.
It looked like mine. But the date made no sense.
I had been in Virginia that week, on active duty. My attorney had already confirmed it.
You didn't sign this.
No.
He slid another page across the table.
A notarization.
The notary's name was familiar.
My father had used the same notary for several business documents.
I stared at it. Can we prove I wasn't there?
Yes. He placed my military travel records beside the agreement.
The dates matched.
I was hundreds of miles away. I couldn't have signed it in the office listed on the document. My attorney leaned back. This doesn't automatically prove who forged it.
But it proves I didn't sign it.
Yes. I looked at the account records.
Where did the money go?
He hesitated.
That's the part you need to prepare yourself for. He opened another file.
Transfers. One after another. Payments to Ethan's company. Payments toward the penthouse. Personal expenses. And several transfers to an investment account controlled by my father. The total was staggering. My mother's money had not disappeared. It had been redirected. And some of it had eventually helped fund the very lifestyle my family had been demanding I maintain. I felt sick. Dad used Mom's money. Yes. And then used my money. Yes.
Why create the agreement?
My attorney pointed to one paragraph. It appears the agreement was designed to make you responsible for supporting your father and brother while giving your father control over the estate funds. I stared at the page. So if I challenged him, he could argue that you had voluntarily accepted those obligations. I understood. The penthouse wasn't the real target. My income was. The family had spent years creating a structure where I felt morally obligated to pay. Now I had the documents to show how that structure had been built. My phone buzzed. Dad. I didn't answer. Then a message appeared. We need to talk about Mom's money. I looked at my attorney. He nodded. Don't respond. Another message. You have no idea what you're accusing me of. Then, if you involve lawyers, this family will never recover. That one made me laugh. After everything, he still believed the problem was my reaction, not what he had done. My attorney copied the records. He also advised me to preserve every message, photograph, bank statement, and email. So I did. I created a secure folder. Then another backup. For the first time, I wasn't preparing to defend myself emotionally. I was preparing to defend myself with facts. That evening, Ethan called. I answered. Claire. What? I need you to listen. I've been listening for years. He exhaled. Dad didn't tell me everything. What did he tell you? That the agreement was legitimate. And did you believe him? Yes. Why? Because he said Mom wanted the family protected. I closed my eyes. Ethan, did you sign anything? Silence. What did you sign? I signed some business documents. Related to Mom's money? I don't know. You don't know?
He told me they were family transfers. I felt a chill.
Ethan, how much money did you receive?
He didn't answer.
Ethan.
About $34,000 from the account.
And how much did Dad give you separately?
Silence. That isn't all of it, is it? No.
He finally admitted there were additional transfers.
I asked him one question. Did you know the money belonged to Mom's estate?
I thought Dad had authority.
Did you ever see the agreement?
Yes. When?
Before the penthouse plan.
My heart sank.
So you knew about it before Dad asked me to leave?
I didn't know what it meant. You knew enough to believe you could take over the penthouse.
He didn't answer.
Ethan.
I was scared.
Of what?
Of Dad. That answer stopped me. For the first time, my brother sounded like the younger boy I remembered. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd cut me off. And you chose me.
No.
His voice broke. I chose myself. I couldn't even be angry for a second, because at least he was finally telling the truth. Where is the original agreement?
I don't know.
Who has it?
Dad.
Then he said something that changed everything. Sierra has a copy. I sat upright.
Why?
Because she was using it for the sponsor.
What sponsor?
The company wanted proof that the penthouse belonged to the family. I felt the blood drain from my face. The agreement wasn't just being used privately. Someone outside the family had seen it. And if Sierra had given a copy to a sponsor, there could be a digital trail. Who is the sponsor?
Ethan hesitated.
North Star Media.
I wrote the name down.
Thank you.
Claire.
What? Dad doesn't know I told you.
Why are you telling me now?
He was silent.
Then,
because I saw the document.
And?
The signature didn't look right. I froze. You noticed that?
Yes.
Why didn't you say anything? Because I was afraid.
I looked at the papers spread across my attorney's desk. For 3 years, I had believed my family's pressure came from grief, entitlement, and dependence. Now I saw something more deliberate. Documents. Money.
False assumptions. And a signature that could not have been mine. I opened the photograph Dad had sent me one more time. Then I zoomed into the bottom corner. There was a second signature.
Not mine. My mother's.
And underneath it was a date.
7 days before she died.
My attorney looked at the image.
His expression changed. Claire.
What? This may be the part your father never expected you to find. He pointed to the signature. If your mother signed this before her death, then the document wasn't created after she died. I stared at the screen. Then what is it? He leaned closer. That's exactly what we're going to find out. And for the first time, I realized the penthouse fight had never been the beginning. It had been the cover story. The real battle had started before my mother died. My attorney looked at the image again. If your mother's signature is genuine, This document may have been prepared before her death and altered afterward. Altered how? We don't know yet. He pointed to the date. Your father may have added pages after she signed, or someone may have created a second version using an authentic signature. I stared at the page. So Mom knew? Possibly. That possibility hurt more than I expected. Because if my mother had known about the document, then there was a reason she had kept it from me. My attorney obtained the original from the notary. The next morning, we compared every page. The signature was genuine. My mother's signature. But the page containing my supposed agreement had been inserted later. The paper stock was different. The ink was different. Even the staple marks didn't match. My attorney placed the two versions beside each other. This page wasn't part of the original document. I felt my stomach drop. So my signature was copied. Yes. And Dad knew. That's what the evidence suggests. Then we found the final piece. A handwritten note attached to the original agreement. It was from my mother. The note was dated 7 days before she died. It read, Martin, Claire must never be forced to carry what isn't hers. The money is for her future. If you need help, ask her. Don't take it. I read it twice. Then a third time. My mother had known exactly who I was. Not the daughter who paid. Not the daughter who solved problems. Just her daughter. My attorney showed me another line. Claire should never be made responsible for Ethan's choices. I covered my mouth. For years, I had wondered whether I was betraying my mother by refusing to help Dad and Ethan. Now I understood. I had been betraying her by believing I owed them everything. Dad hadn't protected the family. He had rewritten my mother's wishes to protect his control. And the penthouse? It had been one more piece of the same pattern. I gave the evidence to my attorney. He contacted the appropriate institutions. The bank records were reviewed. The unauthorized transfers were documented. The false agreement was preserved. North Star Media was notified that Sierra's claim to the penthouse had no legal basis. Her sponsor canceled the campaign. Ethan's agency lost the funding tied to the project. The family didn't collapse overnight. There was no dramatic police raid. There didn't need to be. Reality was enough. Dad had to account for the money. He had to return what he could. He had to explain why documents had been altered. And for the first time in years, nobody was asking me to solve it. He called me one final time. I answered. His voice sounded older. I didn't want it to become this. I looked at Mom's note on my desk. You made it this. I thought I was protecting everyone. You were protecting control. Silence. Then, your mother wouldn't want us fighting. No. I swallowed. She wouldn't want you using her name to control me. He started crying. I had never heard my father cry like that. For years, I would have done anything to stop it. Paid anything. Forgiven anything. This time, I stayed silent. Finally, he asked, Are you really done with us? I looked toward the window. No. He breathed out. Then I finished. I'm done being responsible for you.
He didn't answer.
Neither did I.
We ended the call. Months later, the penthouse became someone else's home. Ethan moved into a small apartment. Sierra stopped talking about the Bennett house launch. Dad returned to his old house, the place he had once said he could never enter again. He started therapy. Not because I demanded it, because there was finally nobody left to pay for avoiding it. Ethan eventually contacted me. He didn't ask for money. He apologized. I thought being your brother meant I deserved what you had. I said nothing. He continued. I was wrong. I believed him. That didn't mean everything went back to normal. Trust doesn't return because someone says sorry. It returns in tiny pieces. Sometimes it doesn't return at all. My relationship with Dad remained distant. We spoke occasionally. Short conversations. No financial requests. No guilt. No emergencies disguised as family obligations. And that was enough. A year after the night he told me to leave, I visited the penthouse building. Not because I wanted the apartment back. I wanted to see how it felt to stand there without owning anything. I walked past the lobby. The concierge recognized me. Welcome back, Ms. Bennett. I smiled. I'm not coming up. He nodded. Outside, Chicago was loud and bright. People rushed past me, carrying groceries, briefcases, flowers, coffee. Nobody knew what had happened there. Nobody needed to. I had spent years believing that home was something you protected for other people. Now I understood something different. Home was where you were allowed to stay without earning your place every day. My mother had understood that. She had written it down. I had simply needed 3 years of pain to finally believe her. I kept her note in my desk. Not as evidence. As a reminder. The night my father told me to pack my things, he thought he was taking my home away. He wasn't. He was forcing me to discover that the penthouse had never been my real home. Neither was the money. Neither was the role of being the person everyone called when something went wrong. Home was the life I built after I stopped carrying everyone else's. And the strangest part? The access card turning red wasn't the moment I lost my family. It was the moment I finally learned who in my family loved me, and who only loved what I provided. I walked away from that building with nothing that belonged to them. No lease. No shared account. No obligation. No guilt. Just my mother's note in my bag. And for the first time in my adult life, every step I took belonged entirely to me. I had been told to leave. So I did. But I didn't leave with nothing. I left with the one thing they had spent years trying to take from me. My life